Okay. And I think we're good. Well, welcome to Friday afternoon at the Manor. Who could believe it's already October? I mean, where does this fall fly by? And we have a special treat today, and Mia Della, but our wonderful Susan will do her introduction and give a sense of welcome. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Today we have Mia Della, who is the executive pastry chef for the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, and she's going to talk us through pie making. So, Mia.
Thank you for the introduction, Susan. Hello, I am Mia Della. I am currently the executive pastry chef at the Toronto Metro Convention Centre. I am also a instructor at George Brown College. I've been doing this for over 24 years. It's a passion I have. I live it. I breathe it. I kind of wake up to it. It's always on my mind. But the one thing that it came out of was sharing my knowledge with other people. I don't think I'd be where I was if I am right now if I didn't have others sharing their knowledge with me. So I am very happy to share my knowledge with other people. Throughout this little presentation, please, if you have a question, interrupt me and I will be more than happy to let you answer any questions you have for me. The thing I'm making today is a pumpkin pecan apple pie, and just a little bit of a history on why and where it came from. In conjunction with MTCC, I started to want to give back to our community. So we partnered up with Sherborne Health, and we wanted to do some fundraising. They wanted to do it in October. So we wanted to make something that was fall inspired. And fall inspired items were apple, pumpkin, and pecan pies. And instead of making 3 different ones, we made one pie having all 3 parts of the 3 types of pies. With Sherborne Health, we collected a lot of money for the LGBTQ youth in that facility. And every time we sold the pies, we made about between $7,000 to $10,000, which was really amazing for the kids because it provided them with food and money to do other things at the Sherborne Health. So if you have no questions for me right now, I am going to start with the pie dough. So my pie dough is a very simple pie dough. It is an all butter pie dough. I prefer an all butter pie dough because butter has a lot of flavor. Some people do prefer shortening over butter in that they're very much used to it, and they find that it does give you a very flaky dough. The other benefit with shortening, though, is that when you work with shortening at room temperature, the shortening actually has the same consistency from the fridge to room temp. So it's easier to work with if you're not used to it. I prefer the butter, so I'm very used to working with this type of fat. If you would like to switch out the ingredients, the fat part of this, for a different fat, you can do it. You can go 50% to 100% switch out if you'd like, but you have to be careful because butter has water in it. So when you switch out to shortening, you may need more water in it because shortening is not made with water, but butter is. So if you see that you need more water as you're mixing your dough, you will add it about a tablespoon at a time. In my bowl right now, and I'm gonna tilt my little camera. In my bowl right now, I do have butter, flour, and all-purpose flour, and in this little container, I have salt and sugar, and I want to incorporate that together. Raise you a little bit. Sorry. Okay. So now I cut my butter into small cubes. I just took it out of the fridge, so it's very hard. The more that you work with your hands with it, it will soften your fat. So you want to do this kind of quickly. And all I'm basically doing is first coating the fat with the flour. And then as I am picking up the pieces, I'm actually pressing them to get them smaller. I'm trying to get the size of pea sizes. And when you have pea-sized fat in your pie dough, you'll get bigger pockets, because what happens is the main purpose of having everything cold. So everything you utilize in a pie dough should always be cold. It needs to stay firm so that it stays its shape. And when it gets enveloped with the dough, it'll stay solid. So this solid piece of fat in the oven will, with the heat, will create steam as it melts. When the butter melts, it creates a pocket, and that's where you're getting your flakiness from. The smaller you make the fat, the more crumblier your dough will be. And there's different options for the type of dough you need. So flakier doughs are for like apple pie and fruit pies. When you want to have a more sturdier dough, you want to process your fat a little bit smaller. And we're looking at like the size of cornmeal. So when you break down this fat and you break it down to the size of cornmeal, you're going to get a sturdier dough that can hold a liquid like a lemon curd or a quiche filling, so an egg filling, and it won't absorb in the pie dough as you're baking. The flakier your pie dough, the dough tends to absorb the liquid as it's baking throughout the process. So the other thing that I always utilize is an ice cold water. So before I started, I actually mixed ice with some water and I let it sit. So it's been sitting. And just as I'm getting ready for adding my liquid to my dry ingredients, I will scale the amount of water I need. But I'm trying to get, and you can see the size of my fat right now is kind of still a little bit big. So I'm going to go a little bit finer. And when I get when I get most of the big pieces, then I will stop. And I will add my water. So this is pretty good. I have pretty much small pieces the size of pea. Okay. So a pea-sized piece is pretty small. It helped that I had the sizes as a small square in the beginning, so I don't use my hands too much. You have to remember that your hands tend to give off heat, so they will break down the fat faster as you work with it. So now my fat is good. I'm just gonna wash my hands. And you can see I have my water. And I'm just gonna scale it. And this is my ice water. So I'm gonna scale 170 mils of cold ice water. And usually you wanna go on the side just to make sure that you are getting the amount that you need. Okay. And so I created a hole in the middle of my bowl, and I'm taking a fork to begin the process of stirring the cold water into the dough. So the cold water is going in. Okay. And I'm gonna go from the outside to the inside, slowly mixing the two parts together. And this is the hydration part. Hydrating your flour is the beginning of the process of gluten development. So you always have to hydrate your flour to begin gluten development. Okay. Once you get the dough into a bit of a shaggy mess, you want to take your hands and start squishing the dough together. Sorry, I made a half batch. I actually added too much water to this, so it's quite a bit of wet dough. I did make an extra batch of dough, so I will double this batch. When you're processing your dough in general, you're just trying to get it to come together. If it's the excess flour is loose at the bottom of the dough, then you would add more flour to it. So I'm gonna take out my mat and I'm going to lightly dust my mat with a bit of flour, and we're going to press our dough. And one thing that gives you a nice flaky dough is if you create this into a square. And then cut it into 4 pieces. And take those 4 pieces and stack them on top of each other. This will create layers in your dough. Then we're going to flatten it out. And we're going to refrigerate it in the fridge for a minimum of an hour. And could stay in the fridge to up to overnight. So I have another dough that's ready for us.
Developing gourmet.
Are you okay, John Joseph?
You're doing your cooking magic.
Okay, so this is a 9-inch pie pan. I bought a set of 3 at the dollar store for about $1.25. I like these because I don't need, if I'm bringing it to someone's home, I could just give it to them. And it's a great vessel to utilize, but you can use anything that you have to make your pie. So the first thing you want to do is, before you start rolling, is you want to spray your pie pan lightly so that the pie doesn't stick to your pie pan. The next thing we're going to do is roll out our dough. So for every 9-inch pan, a 9-inch pan usually takes about 300 grams of pie dough. But I made a half batch of dough, so this is pretty much about 400 grams. So I'm just going to utilize all of it. I'm going to dust the bottom of my table and then slightly on the top. When I'm rolling, I try not to roll right away because you're trying to level this off first. So you want to press this dough down to begin the process, turn it, and then press it down again. And once you get it to a thinner kind of disc, then you want to begin to roll. Okay, and then as you can see, I am keeping rolling, turning my dough so that I'm getting an evenness out of the rolling part so that it stays into a circle. So now I'm going to start rolling, and you always want to go up and down in a nice even way. Then you want to turn it and then keep rolling. You want to make sure that you are continuously turning it so that you get an even circle. If it begins to stick, then always lightly dust it. You're trying not to over dust it because the more flour that you add to your dough, the more tougher it gets. And all I'm using is all-purpose flour as my rolling medium. You don't want too soft, and the cake flour and pastry flour tend to clump too much. So we're gonna roll it till nice and thin. And I usually kind of gauge it to the width of my shirt. So see the shirt here? I don't know why it works, but I know when I'm doing a pie dough, it's about the same as this. So what you're thinking is, and you might think that's too thin, but when something bakes, it kind of doubles in size. So if you see double the size of your shirt or your material, it's a perfect size for your pie dough. So I'm gonna keep rolling it. And once I get a nice evenness, what I do is I take my hand and I run it along the dough itself. When you run it along the dough, you'll know where the thicker sides are. And that's where you're gonna roll a bit heavier. What you want to do is be at least 2 inches bigger than your pie plate, because this will give you excess to work with when you are lining your pie dough. Okay. So this is about 2 inches around. And what I do to get it into my pie dough is my pie pan is fold it first, lift it, and transfer it into my tin. And then I'm going to press it down into my tin. I usually like a hangover the size of my finger. So I'm gonna press this in first to the very corners of my pie shell. Take a pair of scissors and cut any excess that I do not want. So I want about the width of my hand, my finger, and everything underneath it, I will cut. And this will just help me get, the lip done on my pie tin, on my shell. Okay. So this is excess dough. It's kind of, the more you work it, the tougher it'll get. So you try not to utilize it at this point, maybe making a little pie, a hand pie with it, or something with sugar. But the more you work this dough, it's going to get very, very, very tough. So now when I get this dough, this is also another trick. This will help you get the edges really tight. So if you take an extra little ball and you press it into the corners of the pie plate, the pie dough goes deeper into the corners. Okay. So now when I start doing the edges, I'm going to do a tuck and a twist. So I tuck it and I twist it. You can see that every time I turn, it's just a press in so that you get this rope kind of finish, but that's not the way that's not going to be the final finish, but that's the initial start of my crimping on the top part. Doing a double edge gives you a nice sturdy wall at the top to have a creative finish on your pie itself. Okay. So once I get it done around, I'm just going to press it more firmly against the edges. And now I'm going to crimp the edge. So I'm going to need a little bit of flour. And I do 1 finger like this and 2 fingers like this. And what happens is I'm going to crimp the edge of my pie by pressing the dough into the 2 and pinching it at the end. So I'm going to press it and then I'm going to pinch it. And you get a nice little finish on the edge. And you're going to go through it all around. And usually the space in between each one is about your thumb. Oh, sorry. Keep going like this, all the way around. And this creates a really lovely finish. The more defined it is, the better it will hold its shape when you bake it. Okay, and you can see the lovely finish. So next you want to take a fork, and the fork, you want to poke the bottom of the pie itself. Creating these holes on the bottom of the pie helps to release the steam that gets created in baking as you bake the pie. This will prevent the bubbling at the bottom when we blind bake it. Once you finish this process, this goes in the freezer for a minimum of an hour until it's nice and firm. When it's frozen, it helps prevent the pie from shrinking, but also it helps keep the shape a lot nicer. So I'm going to pop this in the freezer. I did create a second one. So this one, so as you can see, this is very, very hard. And so I want to bake it in the oven now. So usually I bake this at about 400 to about 410. What you want to do for this is called a blind bake. When you're blind baking, you're actually covering this part of the pie like this. So I put a parchment paper, and you can get these round parchment papers at the dollar store. And I placed it on the bottom. And these are just beans to weigh down the parchment so that it helps it to stay flat. I baked this at 410 for about 25 minutes. And then I took the beans out. When I took the beans out, I continued to bake it for about another 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so when I finished baking it, this was my final result. So you're looking for a nice brownness to the edge of the pie dough itself. And then you want to make sure that also the bottom is well done. Because you're baking this at a lower temperature with a wet filling, you want to ensure that the crust is well baked so it can handle the filling itself. Okay. So we're going to set that aside. Once you have that, then you want to let it cool, and we're going to make our apples first. So we're going to talk about apples. So when you're thinking about apples are basically in season right now. And actually my favorite apple is out right now, and it's called the ambrosia. I haven't had an opportunity to pick any, so I don't have any with me right now. I prefer that as an eating apple versus a baking apple. When you're doing a baking apple, you want an apple that will hold its shape, but also give you a bit of flavor too. So I like, for me, I like preferably, if I can get it, galas. So galas are a sweet apple. They are very firm in consistency. When you bake the galas, they hold their shape, they keep their texture, and they just taste great. They're not super sweet, but they're on the sweeter side. So I always like to have the gala as one of my apples. The next apple I like is a sour apple. but my preference, I didn't have any today, but my preference when in the year is a Granny Smith. Granny Smiths are great because they're so readily available throughout the whole year that you can always get them. But because it is the season for apples, my other apple that I would choose is a Cortland. The thing with Cortlands, they're very, very similar to Macintosh. So Macintosh tend to break down when you cook and you get like a mushy texture. Though you get a sour flavor with them, mixing a sour and a sweet is always good so that you have a more complex texture and flavor in your filling. Another good apple is a Golden Delicious. Golden Delicious are good too, but they really do break down when you bake them. They have a good flavor. They're sweet, but they just get really mushy as you bake. My second number 2 apple that I really love is Honey Crisp. I prefer to eat Honey Crisp, but some people have been utilizing them as a cooking apple also, but they're very expensive. But the flavor with them is sweet and sour, so they do cover both in one shot. But they're short in season, and their season started last week. They're running out now, but if you go to farmers market, you'll find the Honey Crisp. I really do like to have 2 types of apples when I'm baking any type of apple product so that I get a good texture and a good flavor for them. In processing my apples, I usually take the apple and so I'm gonna peel this one and I'll let you know how I cut them for the apple part of our recipe. So usually I take the apple and depending on the size, I go between a 6 to 8 portions to each apple. So I'm gonna grab my, so I'm gonna bring back down. So this, I would cut in half first. And this one I would do about 6 pieces. So each of these I would get 3. The thickness of the apple is kind of important because the thinner the apple, the more it will break down when you cook it. And the thicker, it may not be cooked enough. Okay. So if we do 3, you'll get 6 per half. But if I were to do, say, the bigger apple, like the Cortland, this I would cut into about 8 pieces. You're looking probably, you can see it's about the same width as my finger, and I don't want to go any thicker than that. And basically what I did with these apples were I mixed the sugar and my spices together. I kept my oven at about 420 degrees and I roasted them for about 25 minutes. And then I turned them and then I cooked them for another 10-15 minutes. And in the end result, I got, these are my cooked apples. And you can see that they're nice and soft because they're pliable, but they've kept their shape. And you can see the Cortland ones got really mushy, which is something I really don't like, but I do like the comparison of the sour and the sweet apple. So it's up to you how you would like to utilize those or what kinds of apples that you would like to use. And so taste your apple and decide which apples you'd like to utilize to make your filling. I also enhanced the apple filling with some orange zest and lemon zest because I had it on hand. A little bit of citrus always gives you a bit of a freshening kind of flavor to your end product. Okay. The second part of the decorations are pecans. So I purchased whole pecans Pecans are quite expensive, just to let you know. If you do not like nuts, then it is totally up to you. If you would rather have not have pecans, but it was just another part of the recipe that incorporated the third pie. So this is the pecans, and basically what I did with these were I used egg whites, and I have actually egg whites in the carton. So these are my egg whites in the carton. I mixed it with my pecans. I used a sugar and spiced with cinnamon, a little bit of ginger, a little bit of nutmeg, and then I coated that with the nuts, and then I roasted them for about 10 minutes in a 400-degree oven. The apples and the pecans should be done before you start making your pie, only because they need to be cold for you to put them on the pie itself. Okay. Does anyone have questions about the apples, the pecans, or any of the processes of cooking?
Super yum.
Mhm.
So it's interesting because you cook the apples ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because you're mixing it with pumpkin, I imagine.
No, they're the actual decoration on the top of the pumpkin pie. We're not mixing it in the pie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so because normally when I cooked an apple pie, you cook them raw. But the other question would be, I noticed you left the peel on, and I leave the peel on too.
Oh no, I don't leave the peel on. I peeled them.
Oh, you peel. Okay, so okay, good. So. Is there ever a time you wouldn't peel them?
It honestly is up to you. When you keep the skin on, they don't break it down as well as if they didn't have the skin on. The skin is a little bit tougher than the rest of the flesh of the apple, so you may get residual bite to it. That would be the only thing.
Okay, good to know. Wow. Okay, I like that. Okay.
Any other questions for me?
I like what you did with the pecans. That's great. Okay.
Yeah, you know what? These are also, so I know you're gearing away from sugar, but these are a great addition to salads when you have if you make extra of these are great on salads. We used to do a pear salad with the pecans and some goat cheese. It was really good at work.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So no other questions. We're going to start with the pumpkin pie filling. So this is the pumpkin pie filling ingredients. This is my puree, brown sugar, vanilla, my spices, my flour, my eggs, my corn syrup, and my milk. The one thing with this recipe is that if you want to make this ahead, you want to keep away the corn syrup, the milk, and the eggs, and add it just before you make the filling. So from our experience of making the filling, when we made it too far ahead, it tended to crack the pie. If you do it the day before, is 100%. When you bake it the day of, the pie will crack. So we always used to mix everything except those 3 ingredients, and just before we're ready to bake, then we add the other 3 ingredients. I think I'm not sure why it does that, but I'm assuming that it's absorbing too much of the liquid, that it's too tight, and when there's not enough liquid, it cracks because that's why it's too dry. Okay, so I'm gonna mix our filling. So all I'm doing is I'm adding my brown sugar. I'm gonna turn this down so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm gonna add my brown sugar. And this is just the recipe I gave is really honestly for a 9-inch pie. So it will be just enough for the 9-inch pie. So I'm adding my flour, my spices, my vanilla, my eggs. Okay. My corn syrup. And just before I add my milk, I want to mix this part first. Okay. Take my whisk and I'm going to just mix this ingredients together. Now I'm going to add my milk. Once I know all my ingredients have been distributed evenly throughout my mixture, I'm going to add my milk. And because I'm lactose, this is actually a whole milk that's lactose free. So I'm going to add that in and then give it a stir. And then once I have that, I'm going to take my pie, which was Philly baked. Okay, center it as much as I can. And then I'm going to fill it with my filling. Okay, so then I'm just going to even it out. I'm going to pop it in my 360-degree oven and I'm going to bake it for 20 minutes first. And then I'm going to keep checking it until it jiggles. So when I do this to it, it shouldn't do that waving action. It should jiggle like Jello. So I'm going to pop my my pie in the oven and we'll let it bake for 20 minutes. And then we'll check it after 20 minutes. But because I knew you guys were going to be here, I did do a second pie. So this is my finished pumpkin part of the pie itself. Okay. And so it's very set. And usually we like to let it sit for maybe 15 to 20 minutes and let it cool so that the surface of the pie is nice and set before we start decorating the pie itself. So once you have it chill, well, I've left it outside for a little bit, but it's okay now, so it's good. And the way to finish the pie, so show it to you. So we're going to take our apples first. And this was the 5. I did 6 apples, but you can do more or less. And basically what you want to do is take your apples and line the outside of it. And usually you want the mixture of the sour and the sweet apples. All the way around. And it's okay if it doesn't look perfect right now. And you're just going to go back and put any extra that you like. Okay. Usually I like to do like an opposite side so that it gets a good kind of finish here. And any excess apples you can always use for ice cream topping or just to eat with a little bit of just to eat on top of pancakes or anything else. Okay, so once you get your apples nicely lined, okay, the next thing you're going to add is your pecans. And I usually like the whole pecan so that I get a nice crunch. But people always think that the bigger the whole ones are a little bit more fancy and look a little nicer on your pie. Okay. And then once you do that and you have enough pecans, and this is a total preference to you of how much you would like to put on your pie itself. Once you get that finished, then you're going to take a sifter with icing sugar and you're going to decorate the edge of it. So we're going to take it and we're going to just decorate the side of the pie. Okay. And once that's finished, this is your final product. So does anybody have questions for me in regards to the apple pumpkin pecan pie?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was one of our favorite things to make, and it really did benefit Sherborne Health when we were producing it for them. And it brought a joy to us, but it brought a lot of joy to a lot of other people too. It's a great little pie, and it holds really well, and it's a lovely thing to serve on Thanksgiving or anytime. If I was going to give you a option for pumpkin pie filling, so this is the pumpkin pie filling that I use.
Right.
But it is pumpkin season too, right? So in all honesty, you can even cook your own pumpkins and make your own puree by grabbing a pumpkin, scraping out the seeds when you've cut it in half, and then face it down on a baking tray and bake it until it's nice and soft. And that becomes your puree instead of you buying this. It's totally up to you what you want to use as your pumpkin puree, but either this or the pumpkin, the fresh pumpkin is a good option for you.
So would you notice a flavor difference using, say, fresh pumpkin versus the tin?
I don't think so, because the more of the spices are coming out versus the pumpkin itself. And in general, pumpkin spice is what you're getting versus the pumpkin itself. It's the flavor, not the actual pumpkin itself.
So when you added spice, I think you added spice to both the pumpkin pie mix, and then you added spice, I believe, to
the apple and the pecans. Yeah, the
So
apples and the pecans.
What spice did you mention? The ginger? I think that was.
Yeah.
What else did you add to the apples?
So I also added my usual go-to spices for any type of fall item is usually cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger.
Cinnamon, nutmeg. Okay, great. Okay.
Sometimes people like clove, but I really don't like clove, and anywhere there's clove, I kind of take it out because it's such an overpowering flavor that I don't like it. You can play with it, because I know I've used cardamom before, I've used mace before, to even enhance it a little more, because they also enhance the apple flavor. And then with the pecans, I would use maybe a little bit of black pepper or pink pepper just to give a little bit of spice to it. The apples, I could also add a bay leaf. When I roast or poach things, I like to put bay leaf in there, because the bay leaf gives it a dimension that I like as a flavoring. It kind of enhances the flavor a little bit more without overpowering. You can never tell that the bay leaf is in there, but it really gives a nice flavor to the roasted fruits.
Okay. Okay. So now with either the pumpkin pie filling and the apple, did you add brown sugar? I did see corn syrup.
So for the pumpkin pie filling, I had brown sugar. For roasting the apples, I like brown sugar too, because I get a nice caramelly taste to it. Brown sugar is basically white sugar with molasses, and so you're getting a more caramel flavor in it. But you can just use white sugar, but there's also palm sugar. There's also different types of sugar, like coconut sugar, that you can utilize if you're not a white sugar kind of person too.
Okay, well, that's good. So, and then I guess if you could mix it around if you wanted to do a
Mhm.
gluten pie mix
Yep.
or, okay,
Yep.
okay.
With the, if you want to go gluten free with the apple pie, it's a little bit difficult because you have to have proper structure for the pie itself. But if you do need a recipe for a gluten-free pumpkin pie, please let me know, and I can always pass it on to John Joseph to share with you.
And what I did is I sent the recipe to Marianne, but I'll send it out to other people again.
Okay.
And now, does anybody else have I see Susan, do you have a question? Or I did see Gary was on the call. I don't see him anymore. Okay, maybe it was okay. Susan, do you have a question? Oh, can you hear me? Maybe she can't hear me. Okay, that's okay. And do you have a question? No. Okay. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well,
Susan's muted. That's why
Oh.
we can't hear her.
oh, okay. Susan's muted. Okay. Oh, there's two Susan. Well, that's Susan Johnson, Susan Logie. Okay. I did. Susan Logie.
Susan
do you have a-
Johnson looked like she was talking.
Okay.
No, I was just saying it looks wonderful, and you were right about the cloves wanting to take over.
It's
Oh, yeah.
very strong. I always find it, anything I have it overpowers all the other flavors, even though you add just a touch of it.
I use it when I make lamb barley soup, and I find that gives it a nice little edge.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 cloves is good if you really like. And I'm not liking clove, but for my taste buds, it's very strong. So I prefer not to have it in it. But you can always add clove to any of the spices in the pumpkin or the apples for sure.
Yeah. So Susan Logie, do you have a question?
I wondered if you ever tried delicious apples, because I never have. I thought they're kind of too mealy most of the time.
They are, and when you bake them, they turn more into applesauce versus holding their shape. Even when you look at if you look at the gala that I'm when I pick it up, it's like not mushy at all.
Right.
Like if I even if I press it, it holds its shape, right? And when I'm eating something, I don't want to feel mush in my mouth. I want to have a texture, and the galas always hold their shape.
Well, wonderful. Okay. Well, Mia, this has been absolutely phenomenal. As always, everyone check
Been
me.
great. Thank you.
You're
Yes.
very welcome. I hope you guys try the recipe. It is a really simple recipe. Don't stress yourself out by making it in one day. I always schedule it that you do it in a 3-day process where you
Right.
make the pecans and the apples first and the pie dough, and then the next day you do the rest of the things. It's not something that you should stress over. It should be something that you're happy to make.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Should be enjoyable. Yes.
Yeah.
So-
Have you ever tried russet apples?
Yeah.
Russets are a little bit grainy too. You can try the russets. In all honesty, you can try any apples. If you like to eat it, then you can try and bake with it. And then baking with it will give you what the texture will become when it's baked. And you won't ever know the difference between eating it and baking it until you try it. So try.
Okay.
Yeah. So Susan, over to you, Susan. You want to bring our thank you and farewell over the next. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mia, very much. That looked amazing. It's probably a good thing you weren't on site because the place would have been invaded. Next week, we have Jim Harbaugh, who will be talking about social enterprise program for convicts. So this promises to be quite interesting. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I should stop recording now, shouldn't I?
Bye.
Bye.